Hello, everybody. Welcome to Teal Tinted Glasses. We're obviously here to talk about the prospect scrimmage. First thing I'm going to ask, though, is that if you are not subscribed to the current channel we are recording on, please take the time to subscribe. This is where you'll be finding the podcast moving forward. Also, if you're on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, all that wonderful stuff, find us there too. Other than that, let's get the show on the road. Obviously, we want to talk prospect scrimmage at some point, but I thought we'd hit some league news that has happened since I was awake, and some of it I wasn't awake for. So let's get started. Radulov signs in Dallas, 5 years, $31.25 million or 6.25 AAV. What do you guys think of this deal? Oh, Jesus, I didn't even introduce the panel. I blame the drugs. First with me, we have, as usual, we have Mr. Hockey Jerk.
Hello, all of my friends. How are you doing?
And special guest tonight, our friend and your friend, Mr. Zach Devine. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me again tonight, guys.
Absolutely. All right. So Radulov, long contract, a lot of money. What do you guys think? Jerk, I'll start with you.
You know, I'm kind of torn on this one because on one hand, you know, you look at Radulov's stats in the KHL and you look at his stats with Montreal this past year, and you know, he looks like a guy that you want to have on your roster. You know, he looks like he can still score goals, you know, at a above average pace. There doesn't appear to be any drop off from the KHL back to the NHL, but my concern is the size of the contract, because I don't believe he broke 60 points this past year. Mm-hmm. And generally that kind of contract is somebody who's you're looking for, you know, 30 goals, 30 assists, that type of thing. And I mean, if his point output goes up, then by all means I'm cool with this contract. But if it's, you know, if he tails off or, you know, has a hard time meeting what he met this past year, then it's a little dicey for Dallas.
Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry, Zach, what's your thoughts on the deal?
Well, I mean, it's a whole chunk of money, you know, and it's kind of how the NHL is going, and we see it with the San Jose Sharks signing of Vlasic and Jones, where to get people, you've got to offer term. And that was the big thing with Marleau going to Toronto. He was getting more years with Toronto than pretty much anywhere else. So it's kind of a sign of the times. The players want some, you know, to know where they're going to be, and not a lot hits the open market. It was a pretty clean year for free agents, and you know, looking forward, that's going to be, I think, more normal. You know, with Radulov, you know, 40 to 50 points, that's solid second line production these days. You know, gone are your true generational elites, your McDavids. They're going to be, you know, up around 100 points, but just your, you know, elite star players, you know, 50 to 70, maybe closing in on a point a game. You know, that's an amazing output in today's NHL.
Yeah, and I think KM brings up a really good point in the chat that obviously his supporting cast in Dallas is going to be better than it was in Montreal. So I think that we could expect to see, you know, a point increase from him. I mean, if the plan is to actually play him with, you know, Jamie Benn and Taylor Seguin, then I think the sky's the limits for a player like Radulov. I guess my only question is, I know they've improved somewhat in net when Bishop's going to be healthy, but you know, are they back to being a glass cannon?
You know, so much depends on their defense. You know, their defense was atrocious, and I think Klingberg is well aligned to have a bounce back year. I think he's one of the excellent young defenders in the NHL. That whole team just struggled last year. And when your goaltending is that suspect as a defenseman, even an offensive defenseman, that creeps in your head. Mm-hmm. You're going to gamble less. Everything's going to be a little safer. You know, a player like Klingberg is akin to a Brent Burns. You've got to completely unleash him. You're going to have some head scratchers and just throw your hands up once in a while. But what they create, you know, the other 85% of the time is well worth the 15% of Harper.
Sorry, go ahead. Jerk, anything?
I I I don't know how I feel about Dallas because I look at their goaltending and I think it's a very solid 1-2 punch when you consider Ben Bishop and the games he's played the past couple years. I mean, you take out the injuries, he's obviously still an above average goalie, and the same thing could be, I mean, not above average, but I mean, Kari Lehtinen, especially at the end of last year, wasn't the worst goaltender in the league. There were a lot of games where he kept Dallas in it and gave them a chance to win. So I think they're set there. And when I look at their forward core, I see, it's a nice blend of superstar talent, but also, depth guys who can chip in 20, 30, 35 points for you. Guys like Faxa and Janmark and Brett Ritchie, should he make the jump. The question mark for me, like Zach said, was their defense. I mean, you have to assume that John Klingberg will have a bounce back year. And I mean,
Yeah.
Dan Hamhuis, I mean, he's still a quality defenseman, but after that, you're putting a lot of faith into your young guys, whether it's, Nemeth or Lindell or, Julius Honka. There's definitely going to be a lot of slack that's going to have to be given to these guys just because it's such a young defensive core and a very Scandinavian defensive core when you consider all the Finns they have there.
Yeah. And of that list, like I like Honka quite a bit. Lindell is, I've talked to a couple of different scouts and opinions vary wildly on him. Some feel that he's a turnover machine. And I've seen him even at the AHL level. A lot of plays can die on his stick. For the positives that he brings, further refinement is needed and maturation to his game. But, you'd rather see that and then detune it a little bit than try to take, say, a defensive defenseman and say, guess what? You need to learn how to join the rush.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's completely fair. In response, Montreal signs Ilya Temsky for 1 year for $1 million. I can't really argue here. It's a 1 year, $1 million deal. It doesn't get much more low risk than that. I mean, the reward's potential, but Ilya Temsky hasn't impressed me in a long time.
For $1 million, you can do a heck of a lot worse.
Absolutely, and that's I think that sums it up as best as you can. What else happened? Nail Yakupov gets a 1 year, $875,000 contract in Colorado. I kind of like this move. For Colorado. I mean, they really have nothing to lose at this point. Adding Yakupov for nothing. I don't. I mean, obviously he's never lived up to his draft pedigree, and I don't think he ever will. But again, I think there's worse ways you could spend that money. Jerk, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Nail Yakupov, as you said, definitely has not lived up to his expectations. I don't even think he has sniffed the furthest away part of his expectations. I think he's super far off. But at the same time, you look at his stats when he was on the Sarnia Sting and you consider the fact he went number 1 overall. There's,
right.
As Joe Sakic, you kind of have to hope and believe that some of that offensive prowess is, locked away somewhere. And maybe an offensively gifted centerman like Nate McKinnon or, God forbid, Matt Duchene is still there. Maybe a guy like that can unlock some of that offensive prowess that has been hidden for so long. And as you said, it's such a low risk signing. I mean, why not? What's the worst thing you do at the deadline? You trade him for a 6th, and you have a draft pick.
Do you think this is Yakupov's last go around in the NHL?
I think so. Only because when you look at the stats, and I believe his rookie season, he had more goals in that one season than he's had in the rest of his seasons combined. Mm-hmm. So definitely not a trajectory you want to be on. But like I said, there's no guarantee that he's totally done. Something may come alive in him, and he might be a 20-goal scorer like he was that first season with the Oilers in the lockout.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. Alex Galchenyuk. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as beaten up on as Nail Yakupov is, he's still the fourth highest scoring player from his draft class.
Yeah.
Only Alex Galchenyuk, Philip Forsberg, and Tomas Hertl have more points than him, and Hertl only has 4 more points.
Right.
So, as huge as the Sharks seem to be on Tomas Hertl, and I know this panel has had its varying opinions on the Czech winger center. So, but yeah, this is Yakupov's last kick at the can. One way or another, the Russian factor, everything's going to stack up against him. First overall pick in a very, very weak draft class, but
yeah,
there's only so many bridges you can burn before you're finally in the KHL.
Yeah, no, I concur. Speaking of Galchenyuk, 3-year deal, 14.7 million or 4.9 million AAV in Montreal. I thought this was actually a pretty good deal for Galchenyuk. I mean, I didn't think he was going to demand the moon, but I still think just under 5 for Galchenyuk isn't a terrible contract. Zach, what do you think about the deal?
I think it's a fair deal.
Yeah,
all the way around it. It's tough playing in Montreal, and it's tough being a young player trying to figure out the NHL on a team that every year seems, right or wrong to believe they're a Stanley Cup squad. And they're going to have decisions to make. Giving Carey Price $10+ million a year, that's a scary contract to tie up in your goaltending.
Yeah.
Even for the best, goaltender in the NHL, that's just a ton of money.
No,
yeah, but I thought Alex, that's a fair contract on both sides. I think it's just right, to be honest.
That's fair. Jerk, any comments on the Galchenyuk contract?
Yeah, I really like this contract because it's high enough for the player where he can be rewarded for the good seasons he's had. I mean, his 5 seasons in the NHL, he's increased his point output every year. And, had he played a full season this past year, he would have set another career high in points. So he's on the right trajectory in that perspective. But at the same time, it's also very team friendly. I mean, $4.9 million AAV for 3 years, it gives you ample time to decide what you have in a player, because let's say Galchenyuk isn't a number 1 center. Mm-hmm. Marc Bergevin could, with no doubt in my mind, have no problems moving that contract. And
I think he'd move it even if he was a number 1 center, because I don't think Marc Bergevin has the slightest clue what he's doing.
That's also a fair assessment. I didn't want to dip in too much into the French Canadian conspiracy, but
okay. It's fair.
No,
it's fair.
I think you're absolutely right. One way or another, I think it's a good contract for the player, but it's also good for the team. It's very movable and it allows room for growth, because if a guy like Galchenyuk can reach the potential from when he was drafted 3rd overall, I mean, he's going to command a lot more money in 3 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is a deal I really liked. UC Jokinen for a year in Edmonton at 1.1. I think this is a great deal. I don't know why I like UC Jokinen so much, but I mean for 1.1, that's a great deal.
Why not? Why right? Not? He's I believe he's only 2 seasons removed from putting up, I think, like 50 points, and if you look at his stats, like career-wise, he consistently racks up the assists, so he's a decent passer, and he's a good, aside from that, he's super reliable defensively, and I think he just adds, I think he's a perfect add for an Edmonton Oilers team that probably could have used another winger in the playoffs last spring.
Yeah, good playmaking winger that's just a good 200-foot player on a $1.1 million deal, especially after you just drove every single Brinks truck you had to McDavid's summer cottage. That's a smart move.
Yeah, I mean, Jokinen was like the use Jokinen was a guy like I thought if Doug Wilson was gonna like even just dabble in the market, I think that was a guy that I kind of liked, but um, it is what it is. He's in Edmonton. That's fine. It's fine, I guess. I'm gonna come back to this. How about Ilya Kovalchuk not coming over after all? Stays in Russia. He says Olympics was a huge factor, but I think ultimately he gets to come back in a year and he can pick his destination instead of this needing New Jersey to be the proxy for it. What are your thoughts on this, Zach?
I think it's 50-50. You know, they couldn't get a deal done where New Jersey would have wanted to get that move done. Yeah, sure, say the Olympics are a big thing, and maybe they are, but you know, playing in the NHL with a paycheck that you know will be there, that's tough to walk away from.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean and that's I guess that's the big question. I mean I know for like the Europeans from Europeans that I've talked to, like the Olympics is a huge deal to them. You know, the Worlds are a huge deal to them. So I mean, I'm not surprised by that per se, that would be a factor, because I think that I just think that the Europeans are more gung ho about the international tour. Like we've been kind of spoiled the last little bit, but there was a time where, you know, if it wasn't a Canada Cup, you know, now the World Cup, you just didn't have best on best, and that was just kind of that. Whereas that's kind of like they've always had their, you know, their tournaments that they care about far more than we do. Jerk, any thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I'm not really surprised at all. I mean, like you said, you know, international competition is big for our friends who are across the pond, and I think that absolutely played a factor into it. But at the same time, you know, you look at where the New Jersey Devils are at and have been for the last 4 years, and you look at where St. Petersburg has been for the last 4 years, you know, 2 Gargarin Cups and I believe a 3rd Gargarin Cup appearance, you know.
Right.
It's hard to not want to be on a winner, especially when, you know, as I saw earlier from a tweet from one of the Russian insiders, if you will, that I follow, apparently St. Petersburg is prepared to throw all the money at him, and even, you know, received some pressure from Putin's inner circle. So I don't know. I mean, I think if anything, Putin allegedly getting involved just means his paper bag will be insured. But and you know, I don't think, because from what I read, it doesn't sound like he spoke to any NHL teams. It sounded like New Jersey was moving and shaking for him. And
right,
I think if he is coming back to the NHL, I think he wants to know for sure that he'll be on a winner and doesn't want to, you know, have to cross his fingers that New Jersey will lower their asking price, because I have to imagine they asked for the moon for Kovalchuk.
As well they should. It's their asset.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. What else we got here? What did you guys think of Mark Fizzik signing his Panthers deal on his lawnmower? That was way less awesome than Joe's.
It was funny.
I liked it. I thought it was fantastic. I know some people were like made like a bigger deal of it. I think it was meant to be funny, and I thought it was funny. I don't know. People get their panties in a bunch too easily of late. McDavid extension, 8 years, $12.5 million, as you alluded to earlier. Just all the monies. Here's my thing. Like, we talked about this on our, I think our last show, or maybe the show before last, where you know, I said that it's going to be difficult to, you know, obviously build a team around somebody when you look at teams making players making too much money on a team, when you look at what the Tays and Kane contracts collectively have done to Chicago. So this obviously I think is a concern going forward, but as many people pointed out to me on Twitter too, it's not much different percentage wise than what Crosby got when he signed his deal. So I've kind of taking you know, I think that's an interesting point. Zach, where are you at on this deal? I don't want to spend a bajillion years on it.
He's the best player in the NHL. He's a generational talent. He's nearly single-handedly made the Oilers relevant again after years and years and years of drafting first overall. And if anyone is worth it, it's McDavid. It's 8 years. I don't want to get too much into the sports or the business of sports. I think it's more dangerous than Sidney Crosby's then record deal, where they were both making what was about 18% of the cap.
I believe so.
When they signed, I've read some numbers on that. I don't think we're going to see the big jumps, in the salary cap. I think that, there's good news that the Canadian dollar is improving, but it's still, you're not going to see these big $6-7 million jumps any longer. I feel like we've kind of reached the high point for sports for this iteration of it anyway. The TV money was insane, and you're seeing what's happening with Fox Sports, with Yahoo, with ESPN, cutting talent, cutting costs, because they've spent so much money.
Yeah.
On getting the rights. And so the deals, I think, are going to still stay on this trajectory, but I don't think money will. So I think this is a more dangerous signing than the Crosby signing, but if you're going to do it for McDavid.
Jerk.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I immediately had parallels to the Kane and Taves contracts, like you mentioned. But like Zach said, he is the best player in the sport right now and put up 100 points with ease, if you ask me, this past season. And so in that respect, I don't hate the contract, especially because it goes back to the point that the three of us have hammered out many times before. If you don't give it to him, someone else will. So you kind of have to pony up in that regard. And the thing that's a concern for me more than anything is what Leon Draisaitl is going to get, because you have a hard time convincing me that Leon Draisaitl should be getting less than half of what McDavid is getting, which $6 million for Draisaitl minimum I think is fine, considering he's gotten better points wise every year. But my concern is that the Nugent Hopkins and the Lucic and the Sekera contracts are going to make things a little dicey, and couple that with the fact that Cam Talbot is going to need a raise in, I believe, 2 or 3 years. So they're in win now mode, and if they don't win a Stanley Cup in the next 2 or 3 years, then they're probably not going to win one for a while. And that's my assessment.
I think that's a good point. I think the thing that initially I was kind of like, oh my god, but again, it's McDavid, and unlike Brent Burns or Marc-Edouard Vlasic that signed these huge 8-year deals, Connor McDavid's gonna be 28 when this deal's over.
Yep.
It's he's not gonna be pushing into his 40s. It's that I think that's the thing that I really like. I mean, you have McDavid now for the next 8 years guaranteed. No risk of offer sheets, nothing, and it's not like knocking on wood. There's no reason why he's not going to continue to be the best, if not one of the best players in the game going forward.
Real quick, Ian. So to take your point, so he'll be 28 when this deal's over.
Yes.
That means he's got another 8-year deal in him to get him to 36. Then he's got a 1-year bridge deal to get him to Patrick Marleau territory, where he can get a 3-year deal in Toronto.
There you go.
So that's plenty of time left to play some hockey.
So I just have a quick question then for you guys. Given this new contract, how many points does McDavid have to, let's say, average over these next 8 years for him to be worth that contract? Do you think he should be hitting 100 every year?
Yeah.
I would say he has to be north of a point a game no matter what.
Yep.
I mean, if the Sharks trade Brandon Bollig to him and that's his new winger, he still has to somehow get to a point a game no matter what. I mean, loses a foot in a tragic 3-legged sack race accident, still has to hit 100 points. Maybe not 100, but a point a game.
All right. We also had Tyler Johnson signs. What do you get? 5 years, 7 years at $5 million. I like this deal. I'm a big Tyler Johnson fan, and I think having him for 7 years at $5 is a steal.
I like the money. I don't like the term. I would have liked to see that a couple years shorter.
Yeah, that's fair. Jerk.
I really like this contract just because you look at what he's done. I mean, yes, regular season, but even in the playoffs too. Like, he's really come alive the last couple of years. Tampa Bay has been in the playoffs, and the 7 years doesn't really bother me only because he's only 26 years old. So, by the end of that, he'll be 33, which is just in time for him to sign another 7-year deal. Um, and I really like the dollars too. $5 million is nice and low. At worst, he's your second line center, which is not bad considering the Sharks paid Logan Couture more to be their second line center. And I feel like he's very versatile too, in that he can play center with Stamkos on his wing, or he can play on the wing of Stamkos while Stamkos plays center. I feel he's very versatile.
Yeah, I think to Zach's point though, with the 7 years, I think that the thing that would be concerning there is because of the style of hockey that Tyler Johnson plays. Like, he's going to be a very old 33 when this is, you know what I mean? Does that make any sense? Am I just talking out of my butt here? Like, I think
I totally agree. That's why I think it's 2 years too long.
I think that would be my concern if I was a Lightning fan. I mean, I still really like the deal, but I think Zach made a great point.
Completely fabricated from
thin air. This is how we roll here on Teal Tinted Glasses. But I think that's a good point. His style of play puts the miles on the body a lot quicker. He's going to be one of those guys where, I would worry that when this contract's coming in, you'd be like, oh my God, this guy's only 33 and that's him. Like, something I would want to get to the Tierney thing is this Thomas Tatar drama in Detroit. What do you guys make of this? Like, it's, for me, I can't believe like that. If I'm Detroit, you pay the guy, don't you?
Yeah, I would say so, just because he's at 26 years old, he's going to be one of their most inexperienced, or one of their most experienced players when they finally do go through with this youth movement. And yeah, I mean, he scored 30 goals, I think, 2 years ago, and has consistently put up 20. So guys like that, who are proven goal scorers and still a young commodity, you absolutely have to pay. But I think with him, allegedly not wanting to be in Detroit after this year, I think it just boils down to, the same thing with Ilya Kovalchuk. He's paid his dues. He wants to be on a winning team. And frankly, 4 first-round exits and then missing the playoffs isn't good enough.
Zach?
More and more, I have no idea what Detroit is doing. I really don't. It's some of their moves have just been confusing. That's a word that comes to mind. I know they've got that reputation of sitting on young players until they're. I mean, it seems like half their team was a veteran exception.
Right.
Every single year but I just don't know how you don't, go to Tatar and say, yeah, you're part of this, whatever this is, you're part of it going forward. And so all of this madness, I think it's exactly that. It's crazy.
It's insane. And it's just like, I don't know if it's just like, because Kenny Holland has been, is this revered general manager, but really in the cap era, I mean, obviously, this was going to happen because of the age of guys that they had. Obviously, you can't just, pull a new Lidstrom out of your butt. You can't find a new, Yzerman. But, at the same time, I feel like they've really, really botched a lot of, they've made a lot of really confusing decisions in the, in the cap era.
Yeah.
As it's gone on, and I kind of wonder if it's for everything Ken Holland has did. Look at Ken Holland built a team that was basically the toast of the league for a decade and a half, but I don't know, maybe it's time for fresh eyes in Detroit. I'm not completely sure at this point.
I don't think it would hurt, especially when, like I said, they missed the playoffs this year, and then the last, I believe, 3 or 4 years were all first round exits. I mean, at this point, the logical thing is to just give it to the young guys and let whatever happens happens. I mean, like you said, we're in a salary cap era. You can't just build a super team anymore where you have 3 first lines and it's fine because you got all the Little Caesars money coming in. Like that's not how it works anymore. You have to be smart. You have to budget. You have to, move assets. And I think like the Trevor Daley signing made no sense to me. Like, yes, he's got 2 Stanley Cups, but why not go for a third? Why not sign somewhere where you could feasibly win a Stanley Cup? I think Detroit is lucky if they make it past the first round this coming year. And I think it's the same thing when they signed Mike Green a couple of years ago. It's like,
yeah, that's what I immediately thought of too.
Like you're signing, like the Red Wings are running their team as if they were playing the NHL video game where it's like, oh, we lost. We just need to add all these players and we'll figure it out later. We can just trade 10 first-round picks for whoever. We'll be fine.
All right. Chris Tierney, in breaking Sharks news, Chris Tierney has signed a 1-year deal for $375,000, which was his, according to Kevin Kurz, was basically his qualifying offer, and the Sharks didn't offer him anything else. Jerk, what's your thoughts on Chris Tierney re-upping and the fact that this qualifying offer was basically all he was offered?
Well, I think a lot of I think what has to go a lot that has to go into this is the fact that Chris Tierney didn't have arbitration rights. So his choices were either sign or sit at home all summer and do nothing.
Yeah.
And it's possible the Sharks maybe want to move Tierney because they feel they have similar or better players in Carpenter and O'Regan. And I think, I don't know, like Chris Tierney for me is a very polarizing person. Like half the time I'm just in love with his penalty killing and his defensive awareness, and I still like what I saw in that stretch of his rookie year where I think it was 14 points in 18 games or something like that. Like those things I very much enjoy about Tierney, but then on the flip side, it's kind of like, I mean, Tierney's not getting you a first round pick, but to me, he's an extra asset that the Sharks can afford to move because they do have Carpenter and O'Regan who are waiting in the wings. So for me, Chris Tierney is very polarizing, and whether he leaves or whether he stays, I'm fine.
Zach,
at 23 years old and 3 years of NHL experience, I think the book on Chris Tierney is just about written. His last year was the highest point total of his NHL career at 23 points. That's not great, especially not for a second round pick, and not for one with 200 plus games of NHL experience. I think Chris Tierney at this point is a sweetener. He's definitely an NHL player. I'm not taking that away from him, but he was in a third line role with a decent supporting cast. Probably could have been a bit better, but there's just not a whole lot of offensive upside. And yeah, the penalty killing's great. He helps drag his Lions possession numbers up, but at the end of the day, this is a team that, I mean, why overpay for something like that? It just makes no sense. We're slamming some of these other contracts, for being overpayment and a lot of money and a lot of percentage. Chris Tierney is a bottom 6 forward on a, let's be honest, a playoff contending team with the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah.
You put him on Pittsburgh, it's not like he's going to magically jump into even a middle 6 role. He's probably a fourth liner there. So on a true contending team, he's certainly locked into your bottom 6. And those are guys that you have to get on value contracts. You have to get deals on, because not everyone can be, Mikhail Bodker making $4 million on the third line.
Right.
So, it's a 1-year deal. I don't think he's here long. I think, a team that needs some Chris Tierney to me is like he is the perfect deadline flip, right? Because he's young, he's got pretty decent wheels, penalty kill, does a lot of the you can put him out in any situation, and he's not going to make your coach flip out. He's the kind of guy that you are going to see, I think, traded at the deadline for like a second, third round pick. That's going to be depth for a team really going for it. It's not with the San Jose Sharks. He's not going to slot into. He's not going to morph into a second line center when Logan Couture is forced up to the first line.
If the Sharks can get a second round pick for Chris Tierney, then
second or third.
It's still, if they can get either of those, then I will never complain about anything ever again.
Well, honestly, none of us should be complaining ever again after the Mirko Mueller trade.
Very true.
Point.
I mean that was. Whew.
Yeah.
Addition by subtraction is what that is.
Yeah. No. Look at
addition.
I'm kind of similar on Tierney. I think he's a polarizing guy for me too. Like there's a part of me that acknowledges like he hasn't always had like optimal line mates. I mean obviously being on a line with Michael Haley and X on the other wing isn't a recipe for success. But other people, it seems like in call-ups and stuff, like I thought Ryan Carpenter looked fine in that role, and he played fine. I like the deal. I think it's one last show me deal, and if he doesn't, we don't see a marked improvement. Hopefully, he gets some better line mates to play with this supposed youth movements coming. I'm fine with this deal. I think it's great. I think it's a good show me deal, and if nothing happens, then you flip him before he has arbitration rights.
Chris Tierney had .08 more points per game than Michael Haley.
There you go.
Just saying.
All right. All right. So here, let's talk about the training camp. Obviously, the prospect camp, because that's why we're all here, and we've really dragged this out. But first, just a reminder: if you're listening on the audio, then you've probably already found us, but take a look for us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play. Look for Teal Tinted Glasses. Find the new stream. If you are new to the channel that we are recording on now, please hit the subscribe button. And without further ado, let's talk about the prospect scrimmage, which obviously I was not at. Let's you guys need to tell me what is Sean Doogie? I need to know what the story is here, because this is I wake up from my drug induced whatever, and this is like my timeline is just filled with this Sean Doogie stuff, and I have no idea what anyone's talking about. Zach, why is Sean Doogie so making so many headlines and so many mentions in my Twitter feed?
Well, he's 5'3" to start.
Nice.
A very chiseled 140 pounds. I mean, he played with the program, and I'm a big fan of what's going on out there in Plymouth. People that follow me, I talk a lot about what's going on with the national team, because I think that they're just doing a hell of a job with, the best USA players. They're out, these 17-year-old young, the kids really, they're not even legally adults. They're out there taking on Division I powerhouse schools. They're being forced to grow and be challenged. And so I love what's going on out there in Plymouth. Big fan of it. And Doogie, it was a down year for the program overall talent-wise. I'm not the only one that thinks that. There was just no big headlining players, there. But it was still a competitive team, still a hard-working team. And Doogie really took he had an up and down year, and even after the game, he mentioned it. And towards the end of the year, he started clicking more, and then was at the U18s, he was USA's top scorer. And there's a lot to like there. I mean, when you see a young small guy like that, he plays hard. He doesn't have the skating that I'd like to see in such a small player. I mean, even if he was 5'8", his skating's not where I think it needs to be to help him in the professional game. But the compete level's there, the heart's there. I have a hard time seeing it translate to the professional ranks. especially after seeing Connor Garland, with the Tucson Roadrunners, who I think is pretty slippery. He's got some speed, immensely talented. It's just harder when everyone is as good as you and they're also 8 to 10 inches taller than you. That's 8 more inches of reach, 8 more inches of ice they take up. It's a big hurdle. He's going to Wisconsin. I think he definitely has the talent to be impressive in the college ranks. So he's going to head out there with the Badgers, get a free education while being a very, very good hockey player. And we'll see what the future brings for him. But this is a terrible pun, but it's a tall order.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like when I kind of looked into this, because I was complete, like I said, I woke up and this was a thing. I kind of looked into it, and I feel like this is a player who would probably excel in the European leagues, I think.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
But I feel like this isn't the first time this has happened too, where the Sharks have brought like a really small guy into camp and, everyone immediately fell in love. And I think it's a great story. Sorry, Jerk, what did you think of Doogie?
Well, you look at the roster card that they pass out, mm-hmm. and you see that he's 5'3", and we talk about all the time about people who are 5'10" being short,
right?
And so to see that somebody's 5'3", naturally I thought it was a typo, but sure enough, jumps out there and he is 5'3". I've seen it with my own eyes, but. But I really liked what I saw from him. He was along the boards. I thought he did really well. He kind of reminded me a bit of a Colin Blackwell. He mm-hmm. doesn't quit on any shift. His heart's in it, his mind is in it. He always wants to give 110% no matter what. And part of the whole night was when they were doing the fan chosen shootout, and everybody's like, Timo Meyer, shoot, LeBanc, shoot, whoever shoot. And then the person who picked Doogie, the crowd was pumped, and John Root is like, who do you want? Putting his hand up to his ear like he was Hulk Hogan. I'm like,
nice.
This is awesome.
I love Johnny Root.
Oh, yeah, and Jerk had a good point. He sees the ice well.
Yeah.
His skating, again, for such a small player, you want it to be elite. Mm-hmm. And it's not. But he's smart. He's a smart player. He even in a prospect game in a new organization, I thought positionally he played well. Wasn't afraid to go in there. Was not as successful as I'm sure he was hoping to be into the quarters, but it shows that he knows that he has to be there. He knows that that's his role, that that's what his job is. So Tony Granato's out there coaching the Badgers, and so I think they've got a gamer out there in Wisconsin, and it'll be interesting to see what he does, with a couple years of college.
So Zach, my question for you: did his shootout attempt go in?
Everyone was talking about that after, and we asked him, and he said everyone said yes, and the goalies all said no. So I think we were counting it up there in the press box. The replays we saw, it looked like it trickled over the line, but
right,
so I gave it to him.
How about Nick DeSimone? How did DeSimone look in his first scrimmage? Yeah, who wants to go?
Jerk wants to lead us off.
When the Sharks first signed DeSimone, I was a fan right from the start. I thought he added some legitimacy to the Barracuda third pairing, and him and Middleton were absolutely wonderful, and mm-hmm. going into the prospect scrimmage, and I said it on Twitter too, Tim Heat is going to be in the NHL next year, and somebody is going to have to help replace some of the offense from the point by Tim Heat, and I think DeSimone is capable of that, and we got to see a little bit of his offensive prowess in the scrimmage. He scored 2 goals, and I mean, I'm sure Zach saw something being up as high as he was, but for me, I thought DeSimone played really well.
Yeah, I thought he did have a really strong showing. He's certainly going to be, and along with Middleton, those are both 2 players that everyone here on this panel is a fan of.
Yep.
After when I was talking to different players as they were coming off the ice, Julius Bergman and Jacob Middleton were the defenders that the forwards all said when it's practice time and you're going to the corners with those guys, you know it. So I think that bodes really well for those two players. And then DeSimone getting paired, likely with Middleton. You really got to like it, and I like that his defense looked a little bit better. He's got a bit of that awkward skating, but it moves around well. I thought his transitions were a bit improved. Last year, just some of his edge work was a little choppy, and I think it's been refined a bit. And it's something that hopefully he'll continue to work on, but looks like it got some attention. But his offensive ability and ability with the puck on his stick, against younger competition, it really stood out. He was, I think it was Christina was joking that if he gets 3 goals, are we going to get the ice cream interview that we made famous with Troy Grosnick? But
right,
alas, only 2. But I thought it was a really good showing, and once again, the Sharks finding an excellent contributing player to the organization without wasting a draft pick.
Yeah, I really like. I mean, when DeSimone came over and started playing for the Barracuda, obviously I didn't see the scrimmage itself, but I mean, the thing that I loved about this guy was just how quickly he just meshed into the system. So I'm excited to see. He's gonna probably have a bigger role, like Jerk says, and I'm excited to see it. I can't. I'm excited for the Barracuda season, which opens against the Grand Rapids Griffins, by the way.
Yeah. One guy that I think that and especially after seeing him. I'm hijacking Ian's show here, so bear with me. But Radim Šimić was really impressive. I only caught a little bit of him in Extraliga when I was trying to watch Martin Nikas. If you took a Sherman tank and put him on ice skates, that's exactly what Šimić looks like. He's 5'10", 200 and something pounds, and and talking to him after the game, he is built. That's one corn-fed guy. He's solid player. I really liked what I saw out of him, and we've talked a lot about Joachim Ryan and Tim Heed. I think Šimić could be in that conversation, especially if you're talking about a 7th defenseman that's just kind of riding the pine. I think we all rightfully assume Dylan DeMello ascends into that number 6 spot. Makes a nice, lefty-righty combination with Dylan. That pairing has had success, so I think that's a natural assumption and a good one. But Šimić could be that guy, or maybe part of, a rotation. Bring somebody up for 10 days, send them down to get some game action, and just rotate those 3 through. Because they're all older players. Mm-hmm. They're all sub 6 foot, but they're all. I think Šimić could be knocking on the door. Heed and Ryan definitely are. Mm-hmm. So that's something to watch in training camp.
I think Heed's interesting because of the whole, there's no voodoo with the waivers this year. Like if he goes up, he stays up, mm-hmm. or you lose him.
Yeah. Something too I liked about Šimić, just to piggyback on what Zach said. I was a big fan of his shot from the point, like the power behind it, but mm-hmm. just his ability to get the puck on net itself. I was a big fan of that because we've seen in the past, the Sharks and the Barracuda are notorious for having trouble getting pucks from the point to the net, unless, of course, you're Brent Burns or Tim Heed. So that was a nice little thing for me that I noticed.
Yeah.
It's interesting because in AO in the chat asking, did LeBanc not look too impressive? And LeBanc was the next guy on my list. How did we feel about Kevin LeBanc?
I think he was trying to do too much. He was trying to do some dipsy doodle stuff, a lot of Raz in his game. He had some success there, but to be honest, it's a little concerning. He's got the skill, he's got the shot. What the Sharks need out of him is competitive board play, positional stability, and a commitment to a full 3-zone game. And I know I mean, let's face it, it's a glorified game of shinny. That's what it was. But at the same time, you've got to show what you've got. So I would have liked to have seen more of a complete game out of Kevin Labanc, meshing his skill with what he's going to need to be an NHLer.
No.
So, I try to. I'm going to try to say this in the least joking way possible because there was some legitimate concern, at least for me. But the beginning of the game, I saw a lot of what Zach saw. Where he was trying to do too much. He would get the puck in the neutral zone, try and pull a move to get into the offensive zone, and then lose it and go for a change, or lose it and go into the corner and lose the board battle there. In the third period, he got absolutely smoked in the neutral zone. I don't remember who laid him out, but he got hit pretty hard. And
that was Carlos Kutsky, I think, right at the blue line, or right over the blue line.
Yeah, he got smoked like hardcore, and I was legitimately concerned because he didn't look good going back to the bench. But from when he came back after that, he was probably being more cautious, no doubt, but I actually think it was better for his game because it didn't allow him to get overzealous and over cocky with the moves he was trying to pull.
Is it just is a case like, was this a case kind of like Barclay Goodrow last year where he just possibly didn't feel like he should be there? Like, do you think there was an element of that? Just speculating, obviously. We don't know. We don't read his mind, obviously.
Maybe, but when your first year as a professional, if you've already got NHL-itis, that's
not good.
I think that if people want to critique that, I think that's fair. Mm-hmm. You've still got to be hungry. You've got to be earning your spot. You've got, especially with a head coach like Peter DeBoer.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if he didn't figure that out in, what 50 games he played for the Sharks?
I believe so.
Yeah, if he didn't put that together in 50 games.
And go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like you said, the NHL-itis definitely, affected his game with the Barracuda in the playoffs because I thought before he was called up to the Sharks, I thought he was one of the Barracuda's best players, if not their best player. And then, come playoff time, and, Kevin Lacey can attest to this because I was in his ear pretty much that whole playoff run. I was saying, dude, what is wrong with Labanc? And
well, we talked about it on the show. Like, we talked about him being underwhelming. I thought for the first couple of rounds, I think we were pretty critical of him on the show. I thought that he kind of put it together a little more against the Griffins, but by then too little too late.
Yeah, exactly. And the big thing with Kevin Labanc is he's a natural shooter. Mm-hmm. He's a shooting winger. He needs bona fide playmakers to get him the puck, in his wheelhouse where he can be effective and get that shot off. So I think the loss of Goldobin, and I know we always touchstone back to Goldobin. I don't know how, but I think that was a big challenge. And somebody like Philip Sandberg coming over, that could be the piece that helps Kevin Labanc get some of that goal scoring swagger back. Because he can't even Aurore Chartier. Mm-hmm. Because for a while the Barracuda had Chartier, Goldobin, and Labanc, and it was an effective
that was
grouping.
A silly good line.
But it was Goldobin and Labanc in the offensive zone, and then Chartier just, channeling his young Marco Sturm being the 200-foot player to let those guys hey, you do whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
I'll chip in, I'll get you the puck, I'll make a good first pass, and then I'll be the one back. A real traditional 200-foot centerman. Not to take anything away from Chartier, which, player I know we all have high hopes for. Yes. But it allowed those two wingers to really be creative and go for it. And so I think Labanc needs it almost like a running mate, a run and gun partner.
See, and that's why should Labanc do make the NHL in this coming season, that's why I want to see him start with Logan Couture, because I think when he was with Logan Couture is when he played his best hockey.
And then who would you put on that other wing?
Donskoy.
Yeah.
Maybe Sorensen. if Bodker doesn't work out.
I like Donskoy there. I have high hopes for Donskoy this year. I think, he played through some pretty horrific injuries last year, so I'm hoping he's healthy coming into, when he comes into camp this year and can really show us a lot of what he showed us in that first season. I want to see that guy whose engine never turned off, and was never out of a play and just never, never just gave up on a play. Whereas, he wasn't obviously as good, but I think that to just not take into consideration the injuries there, I think is foolish. I know a lot of people are really sour on Donskoy right now, but I think that, he should get the benefit of the doubt. If he's terrible this year, then okay, fine, whatever. But I think that going into camp, I think at least he should get the benefit of the doubt, should he be healthy, that he can, rebound his game a little bit. Who really stood out in camp? And you can make the list as long as you want. Let's not go more than 5, I guess. Who is your who really impressed? Maybe names that we're not 100% familiar with. Although if you want to include a guy that we're familiar with, that's cool too. Zach, I'll start with you.
DeSimone definitely stood out for me. I think that his play against modest competition, he displaced 2 AHL regulars when he left school and signed with the Sharks, which is, that in itself is no small feat, let alone to be a productive, arguably moving his way with Middleton into that second pairing, being trusted throughout a deep playoff run. And so seeing DeSimone with slightly better skating and things like that, I thought that was really positive. Doogie was fun, hardworking guy, easy to cheer for, and I thought he played well. Every shift he was out there trying to do what he could. I thought Shimmick was an eye opener. I really liked what I saw in his in his play. Smaller guy again, and kind of like Ryan, where he relies more on the positioning. Not the best skater. It's not a hole in his game, but he 5'10". I get something we always say. You want your smaller guys to have really good footwork. I thought it was solid. Balkers was impressive for me last year, and I spoke with Dylan, and I always forget Dylan's last name, but he's a good friend. Does some work in the college ranks. We keep up with each other on Twitter quite a bit. I'll tweet out some of his stuff later. But last year, both of us had the same opinion, and Jerk has echoed this as well. Balkers was just a peripheral player all through camp last year. Mm-hmm. He was, you could see the skill, you could see the offensive creativity, you could see all that. This year, even in just the prospect game, there were a couple times, he'd shoot, drive the net, or make a play and get to the middle, and we saw a lot more of that in Kamloops towards the tail end of the season. His game really rounded out, and playing in the dub, and I thought it looked to me like it continued to progress from last year. He's still not signed, and I asked him after the game, first question out of the gate. He was the first player I got to talk to, and I just came out firing and said, "So where are you playing next year?"
Yeah, for real.
And he said he doesn't know,
which is ridiculous.
His agent is still exploring things. He's Kamloops is still in the talks. They're still talking to the Sharks. He came from the pro ranks in Norway. I don't think he would have any problem returning to Europe. Where he'll probably make more than he would in the CHL, obviously. Mm-hmm. But even with like Brandon Bollig, which is a signing that is widely panned. One front office person actually asked me, "What's the hatred?" And I told him it's not so much that we hate Brandon Bollig. He's a serviceable AHLer, and right. In the AHL there's still some more of the rough stuff. But that's a contract that could have gone to Rudolph Balkers. And for Sharks fans and Prospects fans, that's just not going to hold water. It doesn't matter if you feel like you still need a face puncher. in the AHL. That's not going to register when Rudolph Balkers is a flight risk to Europe.
Yeah, and that's the thing that ticks me off about it too, because I was, I panned the Bollig signing because I'm terrified because there's no face puncher on the Sharks roster right now, which terrifies me because it's, Doug Wilson he's always had a face puncher on the roster. So the fact that Bollig's are only face puncher in the organization right now, that terrifies me going into the season, because I think, Bollig's fine at the AHL and he wouldn't bother me in the least on the Barracuda, but dressing up for the Sharks, that's a terrifying prospect to me.
Yeah. Two reports, guys, that we're always watching the weight scale with. Max Latunov looked noticeably thicker this year.
Hey.
And he said that he's staying back home at in Yukon, really working this off season to put on muscle, and he did look like he had put on 5 to 10 pounds of muscle. So he looked noticeably thicker. So did Manuel Werder, who the Sharks are going to get a good look at with the Barracuda this year. He's aged out from the Q. Mario Ferrero, the second round pick, good skater, fluid, lacks mustard on his shot. That's the nicest way. He's got to get stronger. Another guy, only 5'10". And then there's one. I'm looking at my sheet here. I'm going to butcher this.
That's okay.
Josef Koronar. He played for Lincoln in the USHL. I've caught a couple of his games. I thought he was really good. Tracked the puck well. I thought he overcommitted to some plays. Got a little wild at times, but he's a 98. So he was a D+1 player, but that was. He had a lot of good stops. He had some good saves, tracked the puck well. Movement was across the crease was a little spotty at times, but I mean, he's a young goalie. Plenty of time, and that's an organizational hole.
Yeah, absolutely.
More and more, I think it's something. I'm on board with the Sharks' current goaltending recruitment philosophy, which is sign them, don't draft them. I think they've done a fine job. And, excuse me. And it doesn't, when you look at trading a late first for Martin Jones, more or less, developing Aaron Dell and Troy Grosnick has been pretty darn good, for a deep playoff run. Why spend a second, third, fourth rounder? Would I have liked to see them pick up, somebody in the 6th, 7th? Sure. But when you've got Parker Gahagan, that's still trying to sign with the Sharks, you can invite in a Josef Koronar into camp. That's pretty solid.
And you still got, you signed Bevo, who I think will be a serviceable backup for Grosnick. I mean, I think it's still an improvement over, when you consider Armalis or Saunders, I think that's still an improvement over either of those.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not a Bebo fan. 2 years ago when the Marlies went with him in the playoffs instead of Garrett Sparks, I just threw my hands up and no idea. So I think Troy Grosnick is going to be carrying a lot of mail.
Probably. That's not what you compare with. That's fair. Jerk, just your standouts from the scrimmage.
So there were, Zach, named a lot of the people that jumped out to me. Obviously, the guys we expected to do well. Obviously, Balkers, I thought he really showed his nose for the net. I really like the offensive game that he brings. Where did it go? Shimmick, we talked about earlier, great shot from the point, which something I mentioned earlier has been an issue for Sharks defensemen. Mario Ferraro, another thing, Zach touched on his skating. I thought he was a very good skater. Same thing with Alexander True. He's 6'6", but I saw a lot of Buddy Robinson, Mirko Mueller type skating from him, which is always encouraging to see because, you get over a certain height and you're pretty much like a Jenga tower. You're just
right. You kind of become a giraffe on skates.
Exactly.
Like Tyler Doherty.
And Jerk
Yeah,
has an
exactly.
excellent point on Alexander True, and I think you're really astute, comparable as Buddy Robinson, and I think that's a great scouting report for our listeners and viewers. Because with True, I think it's his lateral movement, and same with Buddy Robinson, right? Side
Mhm.
to side, it was a little tough, but boy, those big guys get ahead of steam, and they can. That's
Well,
that's
yeah,
scary,
and you think about how many shorthanded breakaways Buddy Robinson had with the Barracuda.
right?
Too many to count.
Yep.
Timo
Multiples in
Meyer.
every game.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Timo Meyer, again, another player you expect to stand out, and he did. I thought he was solid in his role. As for negatively standing out, Jeremy Waugh. He was skating with the piano on his back. I've said it many times in the last couple days. I don't know if it's because of his most recent injury or the injuries in general, but he just appears to have like a Mirko Mueller level of confidence at this point in time. And I really hope that time with the Barracuda or somewhere else possibly will erase some of that lack of confidence.
Anyone else on the negative side stand out before I pass this over to Zach?
Um, Not really. There was, at least in my eyes, I didn't see anybody get totally burned or exposed, which I guess is fine.
Zach, so who are your disappointments from the scrimmage?
It's a single viewing,
For sure.
so I'm gonna hedge my bets there. Um, I to be honest, I thought everyone just kind of did what I kind of expected them to. Quite honestly, there was nobody that I thought was really, really rough. I'm giving Jeremy Waugh a pass. He had that horrific knee injury.
Yeah.
He's obviously still coming back from it. I watched him a lot last summer. I saw Jeremy Waugh something like 20 days last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And the player that I saw last summer was nothing like what we saw in this game. And so getting, his timing back, getting all that rust off while trying to get the knee going on a guy that really depends on his skating and his game. I don't, Jerk's certainly not wrong. But I'm going to give Waugh a bit of a pass there. Other than that, it's some of the other news. Dylan Gambrell after the game was, I thought he was solid overall, and when we were talking to him in the scrum, he seems to really have a decision on his hands. It seems like the Sharks have made it clear that they would be open to signing him. And, going back to DU on a national championship squad, that's not a bad thing.
Oh.
And he mentioned twice that he's trying to find where the best role for him is. And so I think it's a little dangerous game the Sharks are playing. If Ryan Carpenter is going to be up there or Danny O'Regan or whoever, that opens up a top six hole for Gambrell. But if not, do you send him back to school and really start the clock ticking if he's going to just wait it out and then figure out, if this is a player where his role is that important to him, where it could send him back to school or to the pros, why not wait another year, get your free education, and then land wherever you want, really?
Right, and I guess that would be the concern that a lot of people have is this going to be a risk where if they don't bring him into the fold, where he Jimmy Vises you next year?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's on the table. I think Gambrell's he's a college kid. He's smart. He's not locking himself anywhere. He's keeping his options open, and going back, being the big man on campus on the national championship winning squad, not a bad gig if you can get it. Or really holding the cards and saying, hey, I'll come turn pro, but I need to know that I'm not, getting bottom six here. And I think he's certainly top nine, no matter what the Barracuda do. I don't see, him down competing with Macaulay or Clifton for that fourth center. I think he's just too darn good for that.
Right.
But it's,
it's so hard.
Yeah, I don't want to get the fan base in a frenzy. But
Right.
should you be concerned? Lightly right now.
Yeah, I think it's a valid concern. I don't riot down to wherever the Sharks offices are with your pitchforks yet, but something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and then A012345 Norris wasn't very visible. I feel like he played pretty preserved, like he was holding back. I would actually disagree with that. I think that that's pretty much what you're going to get out of Norris. I think that he had a dependable game. He had a couple looks, played well, no glaring holes, but the ceiling on him, I'm just a little concerned about. As I said in our post-draft show, he's going to get a couple years in Michigan, and it's a solid program that recruits well from, as you would expect from the program. He's going to join Luke Martin over there and some other guys. But I thought he actually played pretty well overall with where his skill set is at this time.
That's fair. Couple things here. I want to get to a couple questions. We had a couple questions in the mailbag, so I want to get to this really, really quick. Alicia Morris asked, for me to explain arbitration. So basically, what happens is that a team or a player, more often than not, it's the player, can select to go to arbitration instead of signing a contract. And basically, what happens is you make your case in front of a private arbitrator, and basically the arbitrator will then set a value, and the team can either accept the terms of the arbitration, or they can walk away with it, and then you become an unrestricted free agent. A lot of times, players will go to arbitration so that they can negotiate because if a player's listed for arbitration, you can't offer sheet him during the time that he's listed for arbitration. So sometimes it's just a tactic to, they never intend on actually getting to arbitration. They know they'll get a deal done. They just don't want the distraction of an offer sheet. And another question that we got from at Dave B. Pilot was our thoughts on the Rob Zettler hiring. Jerk, I'll start with you. What do you feel about the Rob Zettler hiring?
There's a part of me that's kind of like, okay, we had him and then got rid of him when Ron Wilson left. So it's kind of like, do you go back with the ex-girlfriend type thing? Like, is it the right decision? But at the same time, Rob Zettler has had a lot of success as an assistant coach throughout the NHL, and you don't stick around as long as he has by accident. Obviously there's something there, and I'm curious to see what he can do with the current roster the Sharks have now. Because let's be honest here, the Sharks rosters in the mid to late 2000s were okay at best, if you ask me. And it'll be nice to see what, the coaching staff in general, but Rob Zettler specifically, it'll be nice to see what he can do with a much better team.
Yeah. All right. Other than that, last final kind of piece. Actually, Zach, did you have anything on the Rob Zettler hiring?
He was around the team quite a bit last year. Just saw him, seemingly all the time, actually, now that I really stop and think about it. He was just kind of always popping around. So, he's a known quantity for the Sharks. He's an alumni. The Sharks do like keeping things relatively in the family, especially when it comes to, player development, kind of those secondary roles. Assistant coach, that's obviously a pretty big one. But, Bob Ugner, I mean, that's going to be a big hole to fill. And so I think that it's maybe not a concern, but it's something to monitor. I think that's going to be one of those losses that on paper it doesn't look, too terribly bad, but in the locker room and in game prep, he was very well respected. And so I think that's something to monitor.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Jerk said. You don't last this long in the league, as long as Zettler has, and has many kicks at the can as Etler had if you're terrible. So
Right.
I don't hate it. We'll see what it brings. The other thing that kind of came from the scrimmage was basically the Sharks talking about, trying to fill the Marleau void in-house. So just quickly, I know this is a really huge topic, but try and be quick. What are your thoughts on that philosophy going forward? Jerk, I'll start with you.
I think it's the absolute right philosophy here because, I mean, the Sharks, you can go out and you can sign one of the scoring wingers who's available, whether it's, Yager or Vanek or Shane Doan, but
Sorry.
but it's like if the Sharks were to do that, go out and sign somebody, there's no guarantee it would work out, obviously, and you would end up just pushing down the young players even more. I think maybe the Sharks, at best, the Sharks will offer a guy a tryout in camp and see what happens. But I think, giving the young guys the chance, I think is the absolute right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And, worst case scenario, it doesn't work out. There will be, at the trade deadline, there will be a handful of scoring wingers who fit that build that will be available. I mean, you have a James Neal, you have JVR, you have, a Patrick Hornqvist, or even an Evander Kane, who are all going to be unrestricted free agents next summer. Mm-hmm. So if you do have to dig into the trade deadline, there are plenty of solid options available compared to this past year, I would imagine.
Yeah. Zach?
I think it's a very, very tall order. I don't have faith in Michael Bodker being a 20-goal scorer, despite what the front office seems to think. With Kevin LeBanc, I think he's still putting it together as a pro. Marcus Sorensen, with his speed, which is unrivaled now with Patrick Marleau's departure, I think he's up there. But for it to count on him to become a 20-goal scorer in his second year in North America, I think that's a little steep, especially with the reckless.
Doesn't have a contract yet, does he?
I think he's signed.
Did he?
No, I believe he's still an RFA.
Is he? I gotta look.
I know. What have I done?
I don't know.
I believe it's him and Barclay Goodrow who are still on.
Okay,
that's what I see too.
Excellent. So, now you can add with Rudolph Balkers as far as concerning unsigned San Jose Sharks. You can add Marcus Sorensen.
Add Marcus Sorensen to the list.
You take Sorensen's speed out of that lineup. Whoo, boy, is it slow.
Yeah.
I mean, then Bodker's your speedy forward? All right. Sure, I guess. I mean, if that's what trips your trigger.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't see that. It would take a number of players to really step up, and I know that the front office has referenced other teams' young players stepping in and making impacts, but those were guys that were really properly seasoned as well.
And I don't recall having a Sidney Crosby for Kevin LeBanc to play with.
Right, or when you get dropped down to the second line, being forced to skate with Gino.
Right. Yeah, I know. I saw the Gensel comparison. I'm just like, oh, geez, what is this crap?
Yeah, and that's not a knock on Logan Couture, who is an excellent second line center, but he's not Yevgeny Malkin, and I'm sorry to be that person to break that news to everybody. But I think the Sharks are going to struggle to score goals. Thornton coming back from that knee injury. I don't think he'll be 100% to start the season. I know what everyone's protesting, that he'll be ready and he'll be good to go. That's at 38. That's just different. But Donskoy, the player that you mentioned earlier, I've had two separated shoulders in my life. I can't imagine having two in the same NHL season while trying to play professional hockey. That's amazing that he even played as many games as he did with that. So is that a guy that can come back and be a complimentary scorer? Certainly.
Yeah.
Hold my beer, Zach. Sure. I'll take that bet, Sleepy. You just let me know how much. I'll give you 3-1 on it. Your money's good here, my friend.
I think quickly.
See,
I'm just gonna. Sorry, go ahead, and then I'll quickly.
I was just going to say, I agree with Zach 98% of the way. The one thing that we differ on is Mikhail Bodker, because I'm on record as saying that there's no reason to think he can't score 20 goals, and I think he can, especially, it's a 1 year where he had an off year. If he has another off year, by all means, you look into getting rid of that deal. But I have a hard time believing that he won't be better.
I hope so. I mean, for his sake. I mean, look, for me, I think I agree with Zach, and I think that, I see a lot of, Timo Meyer and Kevin Labanc are going to pick up the slack. And I don't think it's that simple. I think you're going to need it from pretty much across the roster to replace Marleau's goals. It's not going to come down to one or two guys. I think that's unrealistic. And even as a group, like, it's going to be a tall order. But I still think that I'd like to see some of these guys get their feet put to the fire because, eventually some of these guys are going to demand some money. Tomas Hertl's going to demand some money soon. I would want to make sure that, are you absolutely sure Tomas Hertl is worth the money that he's going to command? And I think not, going out into the market and just grabbing a guy. Like I know I see Jaromir Jagr a lot. I'm totally against Jagr in a Sharks jersey. I do not want to see what the Sharks travel does to that body. And I think that's something that, the East travel schedule is a lot lighter. I mean, yes, I know he was in Florida, but, big deal. You take a plane to New York and then you ride a bike to the next 4 teams you play. It's still, so yeah, I mean, he had to travel a lot in Florida, but the Sharks schedule is rough. And I know it's a more favorable schedule this year. Like, people seem to be happy with the schedule this year, but I don't want to see that kind of mileage put on a 45-year-old body. With that, just a quick reminder again, thank you all for watching. Thank you for Zach and Hockey Jerk for being here. Just want to remind everybody, come check us out at tealtintedglasses.com, new website, new old YouTube channel, subscribe, and look for us on iTunes, Google Play, whatever. Subscribe to Teal Tinted Glasses. That's where you will find us going forward. And with that, have a great night, guys.